Once we've effectively been able to do that, then we can start looking at that transitioning back to community, connection to self, connection to community, connection to, who I am as a person. And ultimately what we're doing at this time is reinforcing new neural pathways, right? New neural networks even over time of association. And one of the techniques that I really like for this is the heal technique. And this is kind of woven into our model as well towards the end. But Rick Hansen has a heal approach. Now, I describe it a little bit differently than he does, but it's an adaptation of this. And he says we need to first have an experience, right? If we want to create or cause the brain to fire and wire in a different way or create a different response, we need to first have an experience. So he says we need to have an experience, real or created, doesn't matter. Our brain doesn't differentiate between something actually happening or us creating this, right? Our brain doesn't differentiate between somebody being with us or us imagining that they are, which is why visualization and imagination can be so incredibly powerful or so incredibly painful. So we're looking at using it as a resource, right? So we need to have an experience. I often say a counter experience, real or created. Then we want to enrich that experience. So we will often try to enrich it by taking it in with our senses: sight, sound, smells, sensations of touch, right? How would it feel, for example, to experience empowerment if feeling weak is what I typically feel? And I'd really just notice and take it in with my senses. We would then absorb it. Now, we can absorb it by going deeper into the body, by imagining what that experience would be like and how people would respond, what our body posture would be like, and seeing things play out the way that we need and want it to. Or we can absorb it by tapping it in. And this is based on Laurel Parnell's work. EFT uses this as well. There are lots of different approaches that use tapping as a form of bilateral stimulation, but I'm trained in Dr. Laurel Parnell's attachment-focused EMDR model, and I really love a lot of the techniques and the model itself. So one of the things that she teaches in the book Tapping In, which is a great resource for anyone, is that we can tap in new affective states, or we can tap in these visualizations or experiences. And it just seems to bring it from up here in our thinking brain into down here in our body. So it makes it a little bit more visceral, a little more integrative, a little more embodied. And what we're doing is bilaterally stimulating the brain. So we're stimulating right hemisphere, that emotional felt state, embodied awareness, and left hemisphere, right? That higher order thinking part of the brain at the same time. So for the absorb, we'll usually tap it in, and we don't have to tap up here. We can tap, it's just easier to demonstrate there, but we can tap on our legs, right? On the top of our knees. We can tap our feet or even on our sides. But the idea is that it's one hand, then the other, not both at the same time. We're alternating. The next step is what I consider to be one of the hardest steps, and that's linking. The linking occurs through repeated pairing. So every time those old messages of "I'm so weak" pop up, or "I can't do this, I can't manage this," right? And there's all these other experiences that reinforce that, because that's just what I've learned to be true. I need to be able to notice that and go, yes, yes, there is that. There is that. I have those experiences, but I also have this experience. And then call to mind that actual or created experience of maybe empowerment, right? Or of moving towards healing in my journey. So yes, I have tremendous pain, but I also have this. I'm engaging maybe in therapy and learning new ways of thinking and relating and being in my body. And maybe there was a moment, just even a moment, where I felt something shifted. So we need to have that experience, right? So I'm going to draw my attention away from all those old patterns and redirect it to maybe the hope or the empowerment. Then I'm going to enrich it by taking it in with my senses, right? Really getting a good sense of what that feels like and absorbing it at an embodied way by tapping it in. And over time, the repeated pairing of that old neural network of association activating and that redirection and amplified attention to those new associations is what causes those old neural pathways to unhook and new ones to be formed. And that's based on the concepts that neurons that fire together wire together. So I hope this will be helpful for you to give you a little bit of an understanding about what we do, how our model works. We often get questions where people are worried or fearful about doing this work. And I completely understand that. Nobody wants to do trauma processing, or very few people do. However, when we're working through it in a safe, structured way, it's just giving us greater agency instead of being stuck, looping, and kind of um, stuck in that experience, which often is very debilitating, very overwhelming. There's, a reinforcement of that loss of control and powerlessness that's often happening. Instead of that, what's happening is we're gaining agency control.